Berlin in November feels like a city made of wet concrete and old grudges. I'm Klaus Vogt, a man who spent 30 years at the port of Hamburg spotting the one shipping crate in 10,000 that didn't breathe right. I know the rhythm of a lie. When my younger brother, Stefan, showed up at my flat after his tech startup in London folded, I welcomed the noise. We shared schnapps and talked about our childhood in the East. But within weeks, the rhythm changed. Stefan started updating my home network and insisting I stay away from my old colleagues at the ministry. He told our sister I was suffering from digital paranoia and early onset dementia, claiming I was seeing shadows where there were none. He even scheduled a consultation with a private memory care facility. I didn't get angry. I got curious. I've seen smugglers try to hide contraband in the double walls of a tanker, and Stefan was doing the same with my life. He wasn't just staying with me. He was installing himself like a virus, slowly rerouting my mail and my digital footprint to a server I couldn't access. The air in the flat began to feel sterilized, like a waiting room for a death I hadn't agreed to. The inciting incident happened when I found an industrial-grade encrypted dead drop device plugged into my basement's main power line. It wasn't for a startup. It was a bridge away to move high-value data across borders using my retired government credentials as a clean tunnel. Stefan wasn't just trying to take my flat. He was stealing my security clearances to facilitate a black market data breach. My brother wasn't a failed entrepreneur. He was a digital mule using my reputation as his camouflage. I sat in the dark of that basement, watching the rhythmic pulse of the server's blue lights, realizing my brother had priced my soul before he even rang my doorbell. I realized then that his concern for my failing mind was a smokescreen for my legal death. If he could have me declared mentally incompetent, he could legally assume my identity for his clients. He had already drafted a power of attorney that gave him access not just to my bank, but to the federal archives I still had keys for. The man eating my bread and laughing at my jokes was systematically erasing the human being I had spent 60 years becoming. He was prepping me for a memory care facility in a remote part of the Black Forest, a place where retired ghosts go to be forgotten while their names are used to sign off on illegal shipments. The cold chain was set, and I was the cargo he intended to dump at the final destination. Stefan moved with rehearsed kindness, placing a hand on my shoulder and suggesting I rest my eyes while he forged my signature on a transfer of deed. He didn't know that my 30 years at the port had taught me how to see through the most convincing manifest. Every time he handed me a glass of water, I wondered if it was laced with the confusion he was reporting to our family. The pressure was mounting, but in the world of customs, you don't seize the shipment until you have the owner of the bill of lading in your sights. I didn't reach for the phone, I reached for my old field kit. In the world of high-stakes smuggling, the loudest man in the room is usually the one with the most to lose, so I played the part of the fading patriarch to perfection. I let my hands shake when I held the morning paper and practiced a glazed, distant look whenever Stefan entered the kitchen. He grew bolder, no longer shielding his phone screen when he sat across from me. He was communicating with a group out of Riga, discussing the final transfer and the disposal of the legacy hardware. I realized the legacy hardware wasn't a computer, it was me. I spent my afternoons at a local library, using their public terminals to bypass Stefan's monitored home network. That was where I found the true depth of the rot. He hadn't just tapped my accounts, he had created a deepfake persona of me, using old video calls and voice recordings. He had been attending virtual board meetings for a logistics firm I helped found decades ago. He was liquidating the company's physical assets and funneling the proceeds into an untraceable crypto ledger. He wasn't just stealing my money, he was burning my reputation to the ground to fuel his getaway. The most chilling discovery was a digital folder hidden in a subdirectory of my own cloud storage, titled Final Clearance. It contained a series of forged medical reports from a clinic I'd never visited, diagnosing me with a rapidly progressing neurological decline. He had even drafted a script for a farewell video he intended to release. Once I was safely tucked away in that Black Forest facility, he was planning to kill Klaus Vogt the citizen while keeping my name alive as a shell for his data laundering empire. If you've ever felt like your identity was being stripped away by someone you trusted, share your story in the comments. I started leaving my own contraband for him to find. I'd leave out old, fake bank statements for accounts I'd closed years ago, watching him scramble to secure funds that didn't exist. It was a classic customs play. Keep the smuggler busy with the decoy while you investigate the real shipment. While he was chasing Ghost, I was meeting with a former colleague from the Federal Intelligence Service in a rainy park near Checkpoint Charlie. We didn't talk about family, we talked about containment. I wasn't just his brother anymore. I was a counterintelligence operation. Stefan's arrogance was his biggest blind spot. He thought he was playing a high-speed game of chess against a man who didn't know the rules. He didn't realize that I was the one who had written the manual on how to intercept people exactly like him. He had scheduled the transition for the following Tuesday, the day I was supposed to be moved to the care facility. He even bought a bottle of 20-year-old scotch to celebrate his victory. I watched him pour a glass, his smile as sharp and hollow as a broken bottle, unaware that I had already changed the manifest for his future. The air in the flat grew colder as the Tuesday deadline approached. Stefan spent the weekend helping me pack my life into 3 small suitcases, his touch light and performative, as if he were handling fragile porcelain rather than the man who had taught him to walk. He had grown sloppy in his confidence, leaving his tablet unlocked on the coffee table while he showered. I didn't waste a second. I bypassed his biometric lock, using a high-res photo of his thumbprint I'd lifted from a schnapps glass. Within minutes, I was inside the heart of his operation, a series of dead-drop coordinates located across the Baltic states. He wasn't just laundering data. He was moving stolen encryption keys for European defense contractors. My flat had become the hub for a shadow network, and my government-issued pension account was being used as the clearinghouse for the payments. If the authorities found this without my help, I wouldn't just be going to a care facility. I'd be spending the rest of my life in a federal prison. I copied every transaction hash and IP address to a secure, encrypted drive I kept hidden inside an old, hollowed-out customs manual. I spent Sunday night planning my own digital contraband within his system. I injected a tracking worm into the files he was preparing for the Riga group. The moment he attempted the final clearance transfer, the worm would trigger a silent alert at the Ministry of Finance, pinpointing his exact location and the destination of the stolen funds. He thought he was moving a silent cargo, but I had turned his shipment into a beacon. I sat across from him at dinner, watching him eat with the calm appetite of a man who believed he had successfully replaced his brother with a shadow. The physical reality of the betrayal hit me when I found the transition paperwork for the Black Forest facility. It wasn't a clinic. It was a private, unlisted residence owned by one of his clients. There was no medical staff, only security. It was a holding cell designed to keep me alive, just long enough to ensure the digital transfers were ironclad. He hadn't just planned to sideline me. He had planned to disappear me into a void where my voice would never be heard again. The brother I once protected was now the architect of my erasure. I realized that to save myself, I had to let him believe he had already won. I signed the medical consent forms he slid across the table, my hand trembling just enough to satisfy his ego. He smiled, a genuine flash of warmth that felt like a slap in the face, and told me I was doing the right thing for my health. It was the ultimate customs bypass, letting the smuggler think the inspector had been bribed. If you've ever had to outsmart someone who thought you were their easiest target, let us know your location in the comments. The Tuesday departure arrived with the deceptive Berlin sun, bright but devoid of warmth. Stefan had the car idling at the curb, his movements brisk and efficient. Like a courier with a time-sensitive delivery, He didn't realize that the luggage I'd loaded into the trunk wasn't filled with clothes, but with the physical evidence of his digital crimes hard drives, forged deeds, and the encrypted router he thought was still hidden in the basement. He drove with one hand on the wheel and the other tapping out a final confirmation to the Riga group. He was ready to offload his legacy hardware. I watched the city blur past, acting the part of the confused, compliant elder. "Stefan," I whispered, "did I remember to lock the back door?" He chuckled, a patronizing sound that grated against my nerves like sandpaper on glass. "Don't worry about the house, Klaus. It's all taken care of. You just focus on the fresh air in the forest." He was already mentally spending the commission from the data breach, unaware that the fresh air he was driving toward was a meticulously choreographed ambush I had coordinated with my old contacts at the ministry. The care facility was a secluded villa at the edge of the Wannsee, surrounded by a high perimeter fence that screamed attention rather than nursing. As we pulled into the gravel driveway, 3 men in dark suits stepped out from the foyer. Stefan's smile widened. He thought they were his clients coming to collect the package. He stepped out of the car, preening in his success, and handed them a tablet. "He's all yours," Stefan said, his voice dripping with feigned regret. "The credentials are live. The transition is complete." The lead man didn't take the tablet. He held up a federal badge that caught the morning light. "Stefan Vogt," he said, his voice as cold as a Baltic winter. "You are under arrest for espionage, wire fraud, and the attempted abduction of a federal official." The color drained from Stefan's face so fast I thought he might collapse onto the gravel. He spun around to look at me, but I wasn't the shaking old man anymore. I stepped out of the car, stood at my full height, and checked my watch. The digital worm I'd planted had just finished draining his untraceable cryptoledgers into a government recovery fund. The silence that followed was broken only by the sound of handcuffs clicking into place. Stefan tried to scream, to call it a misunderstanding, to play the brother card one last time. But the men in suits didn't listen. They had the manifest, the logs, and the physical router from the trunk. He had tried to treat me like a shipment of contraband, but he forgot the first rule of the port: never underestimate the man who knows how to read the seal. I didn't feel a sense of triumph, only the cold, hard satisfaction of a closed file. The interrogation rooms at the ministry are designed to strip a man of his pretenses, and Stefan disintegrated under the fluorescent lights within hours. The evidence I'd gathered wasn't just circumstantial, it was a digital autopsy of his greed. My former colleagues presented him with the project final clearance folder, and for the first time, he saw the tracking worm I'd buried in his code. Every offshore transfer he'd initiated had been mirrored to a federal server in real time. He hadn't been a ghost in the machine. He'd been a fly in a web I'd woven while he was busy monitoring my decline. While Stefan faced the legal fallout of his espionage, I began the process of total identity restoration. It wasn't enough to just stop him. I had to erase the digital shadow he had created in my name. I spent days with forensic accountants, clawing back the assets he'd attempted to liquidate. The deepfake videos he'd used to deceive my business partners were analyzed and flagged across every major network. It was a strange sensation, watching a version of myself on screen, a version that looked like me but lacked the weight of my experiences, being dismantled by technicians. The federal prosecutor informed me that Stefan's clients in Riga weren't just tech investors. They were a state-sponsored hacking collective that had targeted me specifically because of my knowledge of European shipping vulnerabilities. Stefan hadn't just betrayed his blood, he had sold the security of the entire Baltic corridor for a commission. His sentence was inevitable: a decade or more in a high-security facility where the digital world he loved so much would be restricted to a single, monitored phone call a week. He had traded my freedom for a payout and ended up in a cell of his own making. I didn't visit him. There was no need for a final confrontation or a dramatic apology. The relationship had been compromised beyond repair the moment he replaced my medication with sedatives and my home with a hub for black market data. My sister called me, weeping about the tragedy of our family. But I told her the truth. The tragedy happened the day Stefan decided. People were just assets to be managed. I wasn't a victim, and I wasn't a legacy. I was an inspector who had finally finished his last, and most important, investigation. The flat in Berlin is quiet now, the way a cathedral is quiet after the crowd leaves. I didn't keep the property. A place where my own brother plotted my erasure wasn't a home. It was a crime scene. I sold the furniture, donated the books, and watched the digital dead drop equipment be hauled away in federal evidence bags. If you want to see how this case changed European digital privacy laws, hit that subscribe button below and join our community. I realized that my retirement hadn't been an ending, but a state of strategic dormancy that I was finally ready to break. I didn't flee, but I did move. I used the recovered funds money Stefan thought was his ticket to a tax haven to purchase a modest loft overlooking the docks in Lisbon. It's a city of explorers and old maps, a place where the air smells of the Atlantic instead of wet concrete and stagnant betrayal. I spend my mornings watching the massive container ships navigate the Tagus River. I still have my binoculars, and I still watch the manifest, but now I do it for the pure, uncomplicated joy of seeing things move where they are supposed to go. My name is clean again. The deepfakes have been purged from the servers, and the legal shadow Stefan cast over my reputation has been bleached away by the truth. I occasionally get calls from the ministry asking for my consultation on complex smuggling routes, and I give it to them free of charge. It keeps the mind sharp, a reminder that age isn't a decline of power, but a refinement of it. I am no longer a retired prosecutor or a failing elder. I am a man who knows exactly who he is, because I had to fight to keep that identity from being stolen. Stefan writes to me from the prison near Spandau. Letters filled with justifications and pleas for family unity. I don't open them. In the world of customs, once a seal is broken, the cargo is compromised. You don't try to put it back together and pretend it's new. I have a new life now, one built on the ironclad foundation of my own survival. The final chapter Thomas Caldwell might have written would have been about peace, but mine is about the cold, hard clarity of the surface. I've decompressed. The bends are gone, and for the first time in 60 years, I am sailing in clear water.